Okay, we are here, and we're talking about the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Montreal Canadiens, as well as some guys that have been linked to the Habs, others that have been maybe talked about here and there. Maybe these guys have more of a likelihood of heading over to Montreal compared to the other guys. Who really knows? Maybe by the time this video was uploaded, Kirill Marchenko was already a Canadian. Against the commentary made by his agent. Who really knows? But either way, we are in the dead of July. It is almost August, and we are still talking about Blue Jackets and Habs trade rumors. Let's go over the latest on Kirill Marchenko, courtesy of a number of Columbus-related analysts, and also talk about center Kent Johnson and how Maxime Truman believes he could be a Montreal Canadien in the upcoming days. Let's start out with the Kirill Marchenko update, at least as of the night of Monday, July 27th. If Marchenko was traded sometime to Montreal in the morning, then this video looks totally dumb. But then again, there is big reason to believe that that may not actually be happening, as talked about on Spectre's Hockey from earlier yesterday, July 27th. Are the Blue Jackets and the Canadiens on the verge of a trade involving Marchenko? First, you have the RG Media report from Daria Tuboltseva, speaking about how a Marchenko trade is close to finalizing, and how the Montreal Canadiens are one of the teams that have pursued him. Well, we now have some response from Aaron Portzline out of the Columbus beat. Portzline reported on Sunday that nothing was happening with Marchenko, despite the rumors out of Russia. Portzline acknowledged that the situation could change later this summer. However, he stated that it was his understanding that the Blue Jackets hadn't received any calls about Marchenko since earlier this summer. On the hockey news, Mark Sheig also stated that there was nothing new regarding Marchenko's status despite the report and the rampant rumors it generated. The Columbus Dispatch's Brian Hedger reported Don Waddell has refuted the report, claiming it's been weeks since he has spoken with GMs about Marchenko. Then you had Marchenko's agent, Dan Milstein, who spoke about this on Twitter about how there is no Marchenko trade to Montreal happening soon. This tweet was from 2 days ago, so hey, I guess things can change with one phone call, right? One tweet from Sunday doesn't necessarily mean that Tuesday and Wednesday are clear, but it does go out there and say that, hey, the Montreal Canadiens and contract extension talks, yeah, that's not going down. It's not happening. Waddell could be denying the rumors because he doesn't want it to get out that he is in trade talks with other clubs about Marchenko. Maybe he is close to a deal that sends the scoring winger to Montreal or another NHL team. Tuboltseva is reporting what her source is telling her. However, Portzline, Sheig, and Hedger are the Blue Jackets beat writers and are well connected to sources within the organization, and they agree that there is nothing to this rumor. Meanwhile, some Canadiens followers have been speculating about what it would take for their club to acquire Marchenko. Waddell won't be interested in Doc or Xhekaj, maybe not in Oliver Kapanen. Then there's a conversation on first-round picks. Like, I'm gonna be honest, this is the longest Spectre's note that I think I've ever seen in the past decade's worth of time that I've been here reading Spectre's Hockey. I understand why it's like this. I mean, how much rumor talk is there to go around on July 27th, 2026? There isn't really much, honestly. But instead of talking about Marchenko, let's shift our focus to another Columbus Blue Jackets forward. Let's talk about Kent Johnson, because an article posted on DonLesCoulisses.com by Maxime Truman indicates how Johnson's name is resurfacing. According to some insiders, a trade is imminent and the cards are in Kent Hughes' hands. However, if we are to believe the journalists in Columbus and Marchenko's agent, Kirill Marchenko is not about to move to Montreal. Who to believe? From what I hear, Kent Hughes could very well complete a major trade in the coming days, but it wouldn't necessarily involve Kirill Marchenko. The Canadiens could finally get their hands on their second center. Discussions have reportedly taken place recently with at least two teams, the Blue Jackets and the Maple Leafs. Did the talks begin with Marchenko's name, then end with a center from Columbus? It's possible. Which player was involved? This article says the Blue Jackets have approximately $14.5 million in cap space, but they need to sign Adam Fantilli. And Fantilli isn't going to cost next to nothing. No, I don't believe Kent Hughes will go after Fantilli, but it would be like him to help Don Waddell free up money on his payroll. Could Sean Monahan return to Montreal in a role he knows well? Could Kent Johnson, who has been moved to the wing and is coming off a rather difficult season, be sacrificed less than a year before negotiating his next contract? The name of Kent Johnson, the 5th overall pick in 2021, has often been linked to the Canadiens in the past, and it must be said that he represents the kind of risk Kent Hughes likes to take. This was also talked about by Marco Normandin on a tweet over here. This was from yesterday, July 27th. I'm temporarily stepping away from my vacation, but here are the details that I have. Normandin, of course, does stuff for the Montreal beat as well. He said, 1, something is clearly brewing between the Canadiens and the Blue Jackets, but to close a major deal, it would take a third team that would receive the prospects and picks from the Habs and send an NHL player to Columbus, and that's what's seeming to complicate the negotiations. And 2, Montreal obviously has interest in Marchenko, but not just him. I'd keep an eye on a Jackets forward capable of playing center that nobody's talking about right now. Capable of playing center. That's a pretty good qualification and a limiting factor that restricts you to only a few names in the Columbus Blue Jackets organization as a whole. You look at Columbus and their depth chart, you will see a number of guys that have that little C beside their name. Sean Monahan can play center, Coyle, Johnson, Sillinger, Isaac Lundestrom, Belbalouse, Luca Pinelli, Owen Sillinger, and then a bunch of other dudes here. Adam Fantilli, Caden Lindstrom, although, to be honest, Lindstrom is probably not going to be that guy. Danton Heinen is a Blue Jacket. That totally slipped under my radar. And then you have some other guys here on the right wing side. Jack Williams, etc., etc. Kent Johnson is a guy that supposedly the Canadiens have been linked to in the past. And I do agree with the assessment that was posted out there by Maxime Truman that, yeah, this is almost exactly the kind of risk that Montreal would take. They like going after guys that are young, that are former first-round picks, that maybe don't have that best projection heading into the long term with their current teams. We saw them take on Kirby Dach. We saw them take on Alex Newhook. Sure, results may vary, but if you get yourselves a guy that actually does continue to progress and develop, then you're golden if you're able to make it work. Kent Johnson had 22 points in 76 games this most recent season, a big step down from his 57 points in 68 games in 2024-2025. Johnson is like Trevor Zegras, but with more skill and more flair, which is almost impossible to imagine in a way. But it is what made Kent Johnson such a notable prospect in the BCHL and then inevitably in the NCAA with the Michigan Wolverines. Not to mention his production for Team Canada at the World Juniors and at the Olympics. Yeah, you gotta remember that Kent Johnson also suited up for the Canadian Olympic squad. It's a pretty good achievement, I would say. I don't think he'll ever have the chance to make that team again, if I'm being honest. But either way, you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If it's not Kirill Marchenko, do you think Kent Johnson is an appropriate Canadiens trade target right now? Some reports are suggesting that the Canadiens are interested in more than one forward on the Blue Jackets. Is Kent Johnson the guy that makes the most sense to you? Let me know in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.